everyone. It's Colleen, the Preparedness Pro. I have got a great guest for you today. We are going to get out of our ruts. We're going to get out of our own ways today. We are going to learn about living a very purpose driven life. And we're going to do that with Jeremy Haselwood. He's a 2 times best-selling author and an entrepreneur. He has dedicated his career to helping people maximize their talent and purpose. And I feel like in the preparedness community, we are some of us are so good at having the full picture and having that purpose. His personal story of life transformation combined with the way that he speaks and everything makes him just a great guest for us today. He's got some profound insights and strategies that he's going to share with you today. They have inspired countless individuals, and we're really going to help you unlock your full potential and align your preparedness efforts with your true purpose. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on your show today, Colleen.
Well, of course. I mean, who wouldn't want to live more purpose driven, right?
That's why I'm here. I love what your podcast is all about. And I was like, I need to talk to Colleen because we're going to have a great conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've got questions, of course, but we'll go however this conversation leads us.
Yeah, let's do it.
So your story, in my opinion, your story of transformation is deeply inspiring.
Thank you.
Can you take us to that moment when you realized your life needed to change? What did rock bottom or that wake up call look like for you? How did you find the courage to move forward? Share that with us.
Yeah, sure. And before we get to the rock bottom, I guess some context around what led there. And obviously everybody's rock bottom looks different, So my
Yeah.
rock bottom, I just look at my story, what affected me. There can be people their rock bottom may not have been as severe, and there's many people who it was more severe than mine. But for me, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, originally from Oklahoma. I moved to Atlanta when I was 20, really to pursue a career in the music industry. And a friend of mine, we had a music group, actually a rap group. And we, like most of my 20s, like we were performing. I was working a full-time job basically because it's a feast or famine kind of industry. And we had some local successes here in Atlanta, but, got to that point where the music industry wasn't paying because, we're not signed to a label or really selling shows out or anything like that. And then, I was working my regular job, but then I lost my job. So ultimately, like the piece where the rock bottom came in is like pursuing this dream, the dream getting to a point where it's just time to let go because the music industry changed. I got involved enough to where I knew I didn't want to be a part of the music industry anymore. Saw the good, the bad, the ugly. And I was like, I just want to be an artist to make music, but I can't support myself, but I don't want to be a part of this industry. So it's like this dream. The reason I moved to Atlanta became something that I'm not going to say it was a nightmare, but it was just unfulfilling and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But I bet everything on it. I moved away from my home, security, my friends, family, everything that I knew. So that fizzled out. I lost my job. So now I'm at this place where I'm like, okay, the thing that really drove me, my passion that I thought was my purpose is not really that. I've lost my job. So I don't have finances coming in. And I also had started a business through the job loss to really help independent artists with studio time, writing, recording, street team promotion, photography, kind of the gamut of services. But that didn't work out because my target audience was a bunch of independent musicians, which don't have any money. So I couldn't sustain that business. So it's like here I was, had a house, my son was born, and just figuring out what to do next with my life. And I didn't really know what it's like everything that I thought I was going to do and be from my teenage years and as a child, like my life looked nothing like that. And I didn't have that I had motivation because I wanted to unlock hope and I knew there was more for me, but I didn't know where to turn. So that was really my rock bottom and that wake up call to say something has to change. Everything that you thought you were here to do, that's not it. So now is the time to figure out what it is that you are supposed to be doing. So that's the short version of the story.
So your identity came into question, and that's got to be somewhat demoralizing to all of a sudden go, who am I?
Yeah. And
What I mean, you also have a son now that you've got to take
mhm,
care of,
mhm.
and you don't have a job. I mean, that again, demoralizing. That had to have felt like a rock bottom for you.
Yeah, and then it's like this feeling of being a failure. Like I never considered myself a failure in general. Like I never labeled myself as such, but it was like, I had this dream, this passion, and going after it. And it's like, man, I didn't get it. And it was, I probably wasn't clinically depressed, but I know I was sad, just like dealing with that sadness of not accomplishing that goal. And honestly, it wasn't because I didn't try. Like looking back at everything that I did in my 20s with music, like I wouldn't have changed anything. There wasn't any more that I could do. And despite my action and what I wanted to do, it still didn't, it wouldn't have changed my perception and the way the music industry is built. And, just some of the griminess and everything within the music industry. Like you don't see that from the outside. You see the glamour and the glitz and everything like that. But yeah, it was just something where, like I said, it's, questioning who am I? What am I supposed to do? Like,
Did
and
you
trying to figure out the
question?
next step.
Did
Mhm.
you question your trust for yourself that you could trust yourself to make the right decisions?
I didn't question. I've always looked at life in a way of not looking at what I lost, but what I gained. Because when you start to think about what you didn't have or what didn't work out, like that's a dangerous place that your mind can go, and it can be
Mhm.
like this doom loop that your mind can go around. And so I really looked at what did I learn from this time period. I didn't hit the success, but instead of wallowing in that and woe is me, I didn't do it. It was like, what did I learn along the way? And that's really part of what kind of helped create the next phase of my life, was paying attention to those things. And I remember I talked to a friend of mine who was a music producer in Oklahoma City, that really helped me get my start. Talking to him as things were going out, fizzing out with music, and just kind of sharing with him the frustrations and how this didn't go how I wanted it to. And he's like, listen, like you did something that most people, number one, wouldn't have dared to have done. They wouldn't have just left home and followed a dream. They would have been too scared. Something would have held them back. But also, you got to do everything exactly the way that you wanted to. There was no record label or somebody else saying you can't make this song, you can't write this, the music needs to sound this way. So he's like, you had freedom to create, and that's really what you wanted to do. So when you start to look at how you perceived your success was going to look versus how it actually looks, I still achieved that success. I didn't achieve like the financial success and things like that, but in terms of just creating music and impacting people, I was still able to do that. So looking at what did I gain from this as opposed to questioning my judgment, I never questioned that because I would do it again. Even with hardships and everything, I wouldn't change a single thing about it.
Well, I think that's admirable. Tell me, go back to the original question
Yeah,
about the courage. Where do you think you found the courage to move on from this? Who am I? To wait a minute. I'm not going to wallow in this. Where do you think that
yeah,
courage came from?
yeah. I think some of it had to come from just believing in myself. I think it comes from also my spirituality, believing that I'm still alive here today. Like, okay, I know God didn't put me here, and this is it. This is not as good as it gets. I followed what I thought was a calling, and it helped me build skills, and it didn't work out. But there's meaning there. There's a message there. So the courage was just like my story is still being written, and that's a lot of what I talk about to other people who are struggling, and maybe they face difficulties and loss or grief or something like that. Maybe they went after something and it didn't work out, and it's woe is me, or gosh, it didn't work out, and you're questioning yourself. It's like, man, you are still here. Like that had to happen for whatever this next phase of your life is supposed to look like. So I feel like all of that really prepared me, for what was going to be next. I just had to take a moment and reflect on what I had learned during that time period. So that's really how it's like trusting that God had a bigger plan for me. I'm still here. The things moved in my life how they're supposed to move. And I don't know what's next, but having faith and hope that whatever's next has to be where what I'm supposed to be doing on this earth.
I believe that we're eternal beings. We
Hmm.
had a life before we came here.
Mhm.
with our Heavenly Father. And after we're dying, we'll have a life with Him for eternity.
Mhm.
And if you look at the time in Kolob, where an hour is 1,000 years. If you think about it,
Mhm.
our life here on Earth is only a few seconds. I mean,
Yeah. Blink of an eye.
minutes at the
Mhm.
most.
Yeah.
So it's hard to keep that in perspective, because when things go wrong, it feels like our
Oh
whole
gosh.
world.
Yeah.
But if we can remember, that we are eternal beings, that there's
Mhm.
so much more to just right this second. This is just a
Yeah.
blip. I think
Right.
that really helps with the courage for me to go on.
Yeah. No, that's true. And even like on a bigger scale, like there's a lot of fear in the world right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to dive into any specific political. It doesn't matter where you are. Like there's fear on both sides, and both sides create this fear. And there's so many people that make decisions out of fear. And whoever was or is going to be president, there's going to be fear, and whoever's candidate didn't win. And the way that I look at that is like I can't be fearful like that for exactly the reason that you're saying. It's like we were not put on this earth to stay. We're passing through, and this is our time here. And if the world ends tomorrow, like what did you do today to make the best life you could for you, for the people around you, within the things that you can control? The things that you can't control, like you can't control them. You pray through things, you lean on faith, you build community around you, because ultimately, like this is not the final destination for us. So if the world ends, that's the plan anyway. So we're gonna be off of this planet and doing something different.
Yeah. I think that many of our listeners feel like they're just going through the motions and they're stuck in
Mhm.
routines that don't
Yeah,
inspire them.
yeah,
How do you help people recognize when they're out of alignment with their true purpose?
yeah. Um, I think people have to first be aware of it. So there's people who are just going through the motions, but they don't realize that they are. They may be working in a job that they worked in for years, and they can do it with their eyes closed, and they don't know that they want to change, or that they need to change. So one is like being aware of where you are in your life. So if you feel stuck, then there's that signal that in your soul, your spirit, like you're like, I feel like I'm supposed to be doing more. So that's one thing. I think there's a lot of people stuck that don't even realize it. There's people who are supposed to be doing more with their life, but they're so just kind of locked in on that hamster wheel moving through life that they don't even recognize. And those are the people that telling them that their life, that they're supposed to be doing more in life, they may not receive that message, unfortunately. But for those that do feel something like, I feel stuck, or I need to do something different, that's a signal for you to really do something about it. You have to choose that, and you have to make some tough decisions, whether you want to do some things differently and move a little differently in life than you have, because things will not change unless you start to take the action to make that change.
For our listeners who don't know, you've written a great book called
Mhm.
Edge,
Yeah,
and
thank
you emphasize eliminating distractions as the first step in your Edge framework.
you. Yeah.
So, for someone whose life feels like a chaotic swirl of obligations, how
Mhm.
can they start decluttering their mind and environment to see their purpose more clearly?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because what I do find is that, even related to the last question you asked me, like if you're in a place where something needs to change, but you also are overwhelmed with everything in life, and even here, like the U.S., like our culture is very busy. When COVID shut
Mm.
everything down and people had all this time available, everyone was like, "Wow, what have I been doing with time?" And people took more time for themselves, and they connected with some family and friends in ways that they could. They read more. They weren't rushing and overscheduled, and we've kind of gotten back to that post COVID. But you really have to look at these obligations, to use the language in your question. Like if you have all these obligations, it's really looking at these quote unquote obligations, and are they really obligations? Maybe it's not an obligation, but boundaries. Maybe there's things that you feel like it's an obligation, but maybe it's really a boundary issue where you're not obligated to do something. Now, I know, like I've got 3 kids. they're all in their 20s now, but having three kids at a young age that have activities and schedules. You have, work, and there are a lot of things that can consume life. However, you have to also prioritize yourself. Like, you have to take time. I would write down, like, my tactics that I would put with that would be just pause, like, create some time. And if this is you, the listener, right now, you feel overwhelmed with obligations, and how can you start decluttering yourself to start doing purpose driven work? Like, schedule some time, put it in your phone, whatever your calendar is, tonight or sometime this week, and just write down the things in life that matter to you. Write down these obligations, even, like, what am I doing with my time? Is this an obligation? Is this something necessary that I have to do? And some of those things will be, but the things that aren't, like, how can you start to put some boundaries behind that? What's necessary and what's not? What's helping you progress in life and get closer towards your purpose, even if you don't know what it is right now, or what's holding you back, or what's also keeping you in place. There are things right now in your life that are weighing you down, and you may not know what those are right now because you're so busy moving. But when you sit for a minute and think and reflect, those things will come to the surface, and you'll have some aha moments that'll start changing the way that you move.
Yeah, you talk about uncovering talents and passions in your book, but for
Mhm.
someone, a lot of people are just in survival mode for years.
Yeah.
They feel like they're just getting by. Where
Mhm.
do they even begin to rediscover themselves? Are there questions that they should ask or
Mhm.
exercises they can try?
Yeah, I think for people, because I was one of those, and not, I know I wanted something more, and I knew that I wasn't living my purpose, but I didn't really know what to do then. It's like, okay, I have this revelation that this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, but where do I go? What's the first step that I take? And I didn't really know. I ended up going back to school, getting my master's degree. But one thing through that journey, even, was I took a lot of personality assessments, and even outside of school, like, just taking more assessments, like, even as basic as, like, Myers-Briggs. Like, I think you can do that for free online, looking at, like, the DISC profile, DISC, Clifton Strengths, Honey and Mumford's learning styles. There's these batteries and assessments that you can take, and even just starting there, because what you'll find is that once you take some of these assessments, you'll start to have words that come back to you, meaning, like, characteristics, like, okay, Jeremy, you are this kind of person, and it will tell you about yourself. And you start to read these descriptions based on these assessments. And when you read it, you're like, wow, like, that's really who I am. That's my personality. And now there's, like, a label that I can assign to it. So I understand that these things about me aren't, like, weird, or, it's, I'm able to understand myself better. And when you understand yourself better, what your skills are, what your personality is, what moves you emotionally, what doesn't, even as simple as, like, Gary Chapman's, like, love language quiz, which is a free quiz, knowing, like, what your love language is, like, that's major, like, not only in relationships but just for yourself. Small things like that give you this emotional intelligence that now, when you start to put together what your plan is and set goals in your life, you're coming from a state of knowing better who you are and what's going to drive your motivation, as opposed to going after a purpose but not even knowing who you are. And that's what I felt into my 20s. And that's what a lot of people fail at, is not doing that work on themselves before they start making those goals. They just declare something, this is my purpose. And sometimes you're right. I'm not going to say that that's the wrong way, but a more, I guess, in a sense, strategic way and thoughtful way to do it is to really spend time with yourself and learn who you are, what makes you tick. So those are some of the ways. There's other ways I can get into, like, counseling or getting a coach, asking friends or family, because these are people who know you, love you, care about you. What am I good at? When you look at me and know my history, what are things that you see in me that I don't may not see? So it's just starting there.
Mm. So there's some hard truth about goals,
Mhm.
setting goals that actually get accomplished.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about goals. What would you say are the common mistakes people make when setting the goals? How can they break the cycle of setting goals and falling short? Because that's
Yeah.
that's demoralizing as well.
It is. And I can speak for myself and people that I've known that have set goals. And I think a lot of people fail with setting goals because the goals that they set aren't clearly defined. Like they may have a goal to, I don't know, be a CEO one day or have a goal to start a nonprofit, whatever the case. And that's it. That's just the goal. But it's very vague. So I'm a big fan of SMART goals, which is SMART, but I shortened it and did SMRT, which is just a derivative of it. And it's specific, measurable, realistic, and time bound. And when you set goals with the right framework, number one, it makes it very clear for you. So a specific goal that's measurable, like if you can't measure, like, and I know saying being a CEO of a company is like, it sounds generic, but we can measure that. Did you become a CEO or did you not? Is it realistic, which is the R? Like you may be, unless you start your own company and you're the CEO, it may not be realistic for you, given the time frame that you would be looking at. So the T in SMART is for time bound. So if you're like, I want to be a CEO in 2 years at a company that you're starting at an entry level position, that's probably not realistic. So you're setting yourself up for failure if you do that. Now that could be a real goal if you're like, hey, in 10 years I want to be the CEO of this company, and you're starting at the ground level. So I think when you look at your goals, it's putting all of these different characteristics, making them specific, measurable, realistic, and putting a time, like a stamp on there. You want to do it by this certain period of time, because I think that's also what can delay a goal. And putting the time piece in there helps in two ways. For one, when you say this is the deadline, that gives you the finish line. Like imagine running a race and there was no finish line. You're just running. And so it doesn't matter if you cross the finish line in, 5 minutes or 3 months, because there's really no finish line. And that's what setting a goal without having that timestamp in place. That's why it matters, because you can be 15 years old and here's your goal, but you're 80 years old and you still aren't accomplishing it. And that's the case for some people. It also puts some urgency behind you, knowing that this is the deadline. I need to double my efforts, or I need to move my life or structure my life in such a way that I have a realistic shot at accomplishing this goal by this certain time period. So, those are some of the things that I think set people back from not achieving their goals. Also, is having too many goals. I was very guilty of that, and I've spoken with a lot of people, young people, older people. There's like 10 different things that they want to do. And when you have that many things that you want to do, it makes it really, really hard to accomplish even one of those things. So I'm always like, let's prioritize these goals. Like if you have 10 goals, what's the most important goal? Let's go after that first. And let's put a time stamp on that. If you don't accomplish it by this time, then either we reflect on how close we are to that goal and extend the time, or we say, you know what, we tried it, we did our best, let's move on to the next goal. And then you just kind of go after them one after one. Start small.
Well, let's talk about discipline versus motivation, because there's
Yeah.
many people that think they need to feel motivated to take
Mhm.
action, but
Yeah.
you emphasize discipline instead. So how does someone build discipline when they've never had much of it, or when life keeps throwing curveballs that derail their efforts?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is a great discussion. I love like the discipline versus motivation discussion, because these are thrown around like they're interchangeable, and they're not. But I do believe that they work together very often. When I look at motivation, motivation is often an external factor. So it's you're trying to get healthy because you want to live longer. So that's an external thing. You want to get this job, which is an external thing. That's a job. For me, it's like I wanted to make music because like it was always these external things, but the discipline is the internal piece. Like, so to me, it's like motivation is based on nouns. It's like health, security, wealth, happiness. But discipline is like all verbs. Discipline is like action or inaction in some cases. So I do look at like motivation as the finish line. Like once you've accomplished it, like the motivation is what is the end state. The discipline is that vehicle that gets you there. So discipline, if you don't have discipline, like that's the piece. And this goes back to your question, like basically, how do you get discipline if you don't have discipline? And I look at pieces of my life, things that I've done, like writing 2 books. I'm working on learning a new language right now. sometimes it's just not fun. Sometimes writing, I have writer's block, or I don't feel like writing, or I don't feel like studying a language. So, but my motivation is like, I want to impact people. I want to make a positive impact. So there's the external factor that is leading me, but internally, I have to decide, okay, I don't feel like writing today, but I'm going to do it because it's that important to me. So if you don't have the discipline, you have to generate the discipline. Nobody is going to give you the discipline. So I just say, just keep going. You know what your life looks like right now. And it's like, are you happy with that? And if you are, that's fine. But if you want it to be different, like, you have to take the action, and that is the discipline. So it's really the battle of the mind to win the moment. And if you can win this moment, you can win the day. And if you can win the day, you can win the week, the year, and on until you accomplish what it is that is motivating you in the first place. So just one moment at a time, and choosing that moment, choosing not to roll over and go back to sleep and hit snooze when it's time to get up, because you have this commitment to yourself that you're going to accomplish this.
I find that breaking down tasks into 15 minutes, I tell
Yeah.
myself, look, you can do anything for 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything. We all can do
Yep.
anything for 15 minutes if we had to. So if I
Hmm.
start with the 15 minutes, then it turns into more.
Right.
I play that game with myself because
Hmm.
of the motivation,
Yeah.
because it's that important to me.
Yeah. That's a
So
great way to go about it, is breaking it off into chunks. It makes it more manageable and not as overwhelming. So that's an excellent way to go about it.
yeah, let's talk emotional intelligence. You
Hmm.
highlight emotional intelligence as a key to discovering purpose.
Yeah.
So how can developing emotional intelligence help someone break out of a cycle of negative self-talk and fear and doubt?
Yeah. Um, Emotional intelligence, going back to what we talked about a moment ago with just some assessments and talking to people and counseling or coaching, like, all of this helps to build that emotional intelligence. And like, knowing what makes you tick is a life changer, and if I could underscore life changer, like, I'm going to do that. When you put this in, when people are watching this on YouTube, underscore life changer, because knowing what makes you tick is definitely a life changer. You learn about who you are, why you are, and having that knowledge, you begin to recognize what your value is. You begin to recognize what your skills are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and accepting yourself. You start to realize that whatever happened in your life, like whether it's past trauma, past grief, experiences that have been a part of your story that maybe you beat yourself up over or you're shameful over, like, those things are actually not a liability. Like, they're a strength, because you've made it through, and your story can be used to help other people. So, and even if you've gone through great things, a lot of times we focus on people, everybody has some degree of trauma, but we also have some version of success. When we know more about ourselves and we look at our traumas and our success, we're able to connect with people more, and we're able to offer advice, or really help people in life, period. When you see someone who's walked in the shoes that you've walked in before, their circumstances may be different, but you may be able to offer some encouragement or words that can shift a life and change them. So when you know more about yourself, it can help you to accept yourself and overcome, like, the negative self-talk, like doing affirmations every day. Silly as that may sound, just speaking life into yourself, speaking life into others, like, that can help pull you out of a rut and start to change you into developing new habits.
Well, I think being able to ask hard questions is
Hmm.
is helpful in us living a more purpose-driven life. Sometimes the
Yeah.
hardest part of that transformation is facing uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the toughest but most transformative questions that people need to ask themselves when they're feeling lost?
Yeah. One question that always inspires me personally, and when I share it with others, it's a simple question, but it's like, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Because I
Mm.
do think that when we're stuck, whether it's negative self-talk or maybe we're going after something, but we're afraid it won't work out, or we're going to mess it up, or whatever the case may be. Or even like a job change. It's like a lot of people are working in jobs that they don't like right now because they're afraid to step out. And they don't know what that's going to look like. There might be a decision that you're facing right now as you're listening to this podcast, but there's a fear that is keeping you from making that decision. And because you're stepping into the unknown, it may transform your life, and you may perceive that because you don't know if it's going to transform it for the good or bad, you're going to stay right where you are. But what would you do if you weren't afraid? Like, that's a really tough question. And write that down, read it, and like study that, pray on it, meditate on it. And that will inspire you to do something different. But also pairing with that, I would say, what do you want most out of life? Look at your life right now. Are you happy? Is it joy? Is it helping others? Like, what do you want most? And then what's one action that you can take today to start creating that life? So those would be like a few questions that I would ask. Simple questions, but we don't ask those questions ourselves very often, so we can start to uncover this path that we should be on.
Yeah, those are three really great questions. And fear is a liar, as the song
Yeah.
goes, right?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So can you share a story of someone who was perhaps completely stuck and how they found their way out of using the strategies in your book? What lessons can we learn from their journey?
Yeah, I would say from my book, I've been very a lot of gratitude, because I do get messages here and there, whether it's email or LinkedIn or Instagram or something. People have reached out, and sorry, there's a really loud bang here. But people have reached out to me, and they've talked about how the book has been really helpful in determining the next thing. So, for example, there was someone who reached out who recently retired and read my book, and he sent me a really nice message saying, I just retired. I didn't know what retirement was going to be like. I really don't know I've always had an identity tied to a career. So your book was really helpful in thinking through like different frameworks and who I want to be in retirement, and really thinking about what's next. So that was really good. Like, that's one piece about my book. I didn't write it for retirees. It's more for people experiencing change in life that are looking to do something different. Another message I got was someone who was laid off recently, and they reached out and said like their career path, like their professional path, like just didn't excite them. And even though they were laid off, like this was an opportunity to do something different, but they didn't really know what they wanted to do. So going through some of the exercises and reflections in my book really helped them to reevaluate themselves, and ended up getting into a totally different industry. Like, they left a marketing agency and started doing human resources work because that's what they felt their calling was to do. So just taking the time to, read different perspectives. Because one thing about my book is, like, at the end of each chapter, I have journal reflections in there. So it's not a workbook, but it's certainly one of those books where I share some of my personal stories in there about my life and give you frameworks that I've created that have helped me out. And then at the end of each chapter, there's a series of questions to help you grow as well. So it's like, you'll get out of the book what you put into it. It's not a read it and put it back on the shelf. Like, if you read it, do these exercises, like, you're going to walk away with some kind of personal growth.
Okay. So let's say you're speaking directly to someone listening right now who feels completely lost, like they've tried everything and nothing works. What would you say to them?
I would say, hang in there. I've been one of these people who's tried a lot, kind of like a Rubik's Cube. You're shifting and trying to move different, but nothing seems to find that pattern of red, orange, green, and blue. But you're still trying. And the way that I look at it is like, you're still here. You're still alive. Your story is still being written. Keep going. Never give up hope. Like, one thing that I've learned through my journey is a ton of trial and error. And I've had some really good highs and some really low lows. And the really low lows have you question yourself, question what you're doing in life, question if this is what you're supposed to be doing. But what I've found is that through those highs and lows, it's all shaping your story. It's like, I like to think of our lives as really like kind of like a painting, if you will. And each different decision, good or bad. It's like it's just a stroke, and it's all painting this picture of our life. And if you're going through a place right now where things aren't going how you want them to, life is hard, like that's okay. That's like the gray clouds being painted on this picture, but just keep going. You're here, you have a purpose, and there's a reason that you're here. As long as you're awake and breathing, you're on the right path. And when you get to the other side of this uncertainty and struggle, you're going to have so much gratitude for the path that you've walked, and joy, and you share it with others and you inspire others, whether you want to or not. I've encountered that many times. It's like I didn't appreciate the bad times while I was going through them, but looking back, I'm like, man, I'm so grateful for what I've gone through because it helped me grow as a person, and it's helped me help other people. So just hang in there.
There was a great talk in church that was offered last Sunday,
Hmm.
about a man who went to chop wood in his pickup truck,
Hmm.
and it was in the middle of winter, and so he pulled into the forest area and discovered that he was stuck, that he couldn't get the traction he needed on his tires to get out of the space that he was in.
Mm.
But he was undaunted. He figured, well, I got to chop wood anyway. I'm going to go chop wood. So
Yeah.
he went and he chopped wood and he filled up the back of his pickup truck. And guess what happened? The
Hmm.
weight of the burden of the
Yep.
wood gave him the traction that he needed to get out of the stuck spot that he was in. And
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said about our burdens, of
Hmm.
how they do give us traction to move forward.
Yeah.
Uh, and we should be grateful for them because
Yeah.
they propel us to who we were meant to be.
Yeah. Well, even reflecting on like biblical principle, it's, really being grateful for those experiences, that we have, because these are making us stronger. They're building us up. And I think that's a great story and great metaphor, because a lot of times when we're going through the struggle, we don't realize during that process, like we're being built up, we're being made stronger, we're being upgraded. So on the other side of that, we've come up and we're transformed in a way. We're ready to take on and grow, and whatever is the next challenge or opportunity in life, we are now better prepared for it than we would have been if we didn't go through those struggles. So the struggles are never fun, but hear me when I say, when you are going through a struggle, just have gratitude for the struggle. As crazy as that sounds, embrace it and be like, all right, this is time to learn. This is happening for a reason, and I'm just gonna buckle down and go through it. And it's hard. It may last a long time, but man, you are gonna come out and learn so much about yourself, and just have your heart, like built up in a way that's impenetrable.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's say you've got
Mhm.
someone sitting on their couch tonight, scrolling through
Yeah,
their phone
yeah,
and feeling stuck.
yeah,
What's the one thing that they can do right now to start turning things around?
yeah. Well, if they're on their couch scrolling their phone, feeling stuck, I would say put your phone down. That's probably one of the biggest distractors that we have in our lives right now. And if you're listening to this podcast, don't put it down yet. Finish this episode, but put the phone down, detach from the technology, pray or meditate, journal, be still. Because what I've found is like, and this is advice, I practice what I preach. There's times where I do feel a little stuck or overwhelmed, even with the work that I do. So I'm not perfect. Like I have my moments here and there, but every time I'm aware of when this happens, and I'm like, I need to shake things up. I need to just stop. I need to sit. Like for me, like I will turn on like some really like chill music, like instrumentals or something, and I'll sit in a room of darkness, and I'm just gonna sit there, pray or meditate, for however long. Sometimes it's like 5 minutes, sometimes it may be an hour, but just something to reset my mind and take me out of whatever this wheel is that I can be on as well, just like you can be. You have to shake things up and put these little pauses in your life, because I believe that there is power in these pauses. So disconnect and get back to yourself and to the higher power.
Okay, so two more questions for you.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that we get to
sure.
your legacy.
Mhm.
When all is said and done, what impact do you hope that your book, Finding Your Edge, and your message will leave on those who are struggling to find their place in the world?
My message is hope, and I like to think of myself as a messenger of hope. And when I started looking at what I write about, how I move in the world. And my goal is to really, when people feel lost or disconnected or uncertain, like I want to be a voice of hope. I want the book to have tools to provide hope to you, because if we don't have hope, you have hopelessness, which can be very depressing and sad and painful and disastrous. So as long as you have a hope, like I want to say that like hope exists. So my legacy is just hope. I never lost hope in my journey when things got really dark, because I believed in something bigger than me. And it's like, as long as I'm alive, I believe an impact can be made. And for you, when it's all said and done, like hope is something that will help you conquer the impossible. So believe in that. So that would be my legacy.
So what's next for Jeremy? What's next for you?
Yeah, well, continuing the work that I started, I want to put more hope out into the world. Probably write more books. Like I'm still really into the book I put out last year, which is Finding Your Edge. I'm still promoting that heavily because I believe in it and it excites me. I want to do more speaking about it. But then also I have what's called clarity cards. And you brought up earlier, like how can people start? Like these clarity cards are a deck of 52 cards with just some really life challenging questions on them. And when I first got them and I was sharing them with friends and family, it's like I would pass them out and people would turn them over, and just to see their reaction, it was really kind of like a light moment. And then you pass them out and people turn these cards over and they're like, whoa, like this is a really, I have to think about this. And that's what I designed it for, is like these are questions to really challenge you, help you discover yourself. So definitely putting that out in the world, letting people get more in tune with who they are, because I want people to live their purpose. There's so much joy and fulfillment in doing that. And if I can help people get there, that's what I want to do.
Well, where can folks get more Jeremy Haselwood?
Yeah, go to my website, jeremyhaselwood.com, and that's Haselwood. People misspell my name all the time, so I always have to spell it whenever I say my name. Or you can connect with me on Instagram. I think it's jeremy.haselwood. You can find me there. Or if you have business and you want to do workshops or something like that for your employees, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending your valuable, precious time with us today. I really do
Yeah,
appreciate it, Jeremy.
cool. Yeah, thanks, Colleen.
All right. You take care.
You too. Thanks.